What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Cold Email Podcast. Today I'm joined by the one and only Mitchell Keller, the founder of LeadGrow. Mitchell, really appreciate you taking the time to be here today, man.
No problem, man. I'm glad to be here. Glad to talk about stuff that I basically think about every day anyway, so it should be fun.
Yeah, so I am particularly excited for this because I've spent the last few days watching through all your YouTube videos. And once again, I think that it's clear that the way you approach cold email, the things that you talk about, are things that are not commonly discussed. I don't hear these things from, people every single day. So on this episode, just wanted to break down all those things and just talk about how the cold email landscape has changed over the last year or so, how to create a stealth offer and diagnostic messaging, what situation-based targeting is, and intent signals are, and how tools like Claude Code are basically changing the entire cold email process. So before we dive in, could you just give everyone watching a quick intro around who you are and what you do at LeadGrow?
Yeah, 100%. So I actually, oddly enough, come from a nuclear background. I worked in nuclear. And so what happened was a buddy of mine found his way into a group chat. And we ended up starting our first business off of that because of a random VC that really needed help with English marketing in Web3. We scaled that out from 0 to 1 million in 10 months. Over that time, everything we did was via outreach. That's how we got clients. We did outreach for partnerships, outreach for everything. So when that crashed, we pivoted in 2022 over to, and by crashed, I mean like Sam Bankman Fried and FTX blew up and destroyed the market, and all of my clients went out of business. We pivoted over to actually doing cold email as a service and go to market because we were good at it for ourselves. From there, we went from 0 to 6 clients in our first month of sending, which was a really positive signal for me. And since then, I've been one of the earlier earlier adopters of things like signals. We were doing, hiring based workflows way back in 2022. Before it was something that you could just go to a platform and have and carry through to now. We've helped several seed funded startups go to Series A, some get acquired, and we've sent millions of cold emails, generating, I guess at this point, millions in revenue as well. So in a pretty good spot and having fun doing it.
Amazing, amazing. Perfect. So let's get into it then. So you've then been running cold email campaigns for years now, both for yourself, for clients as well. From your perspective, how has cold email changed? And if we make this more relevant, maybe over the last 12 months or so, how has the actual industry and process changed?
So beyond how you go about being able to deliver your emails, I actually think this may be a hot take, but cold email hasn't changed much, if at all, like at its baseline. What has changed over time is the fads that come and go within cold email. So back when I started, the fad was like personalized first lines with GPT and your Google Sheet based off of the description of who they are or based off of a case study on their website. And then we moved on to, oh, we can see what they post on LinkedIn, and that's interesting. And so on and so forth. We get through these fads of making someone go, wow, how did they know that about me? But then the market catches up and they just know that the process was not something heavily researched. It wasn't something that took a lot of effort. And it all comes back down to, is the offer relevant? Is it timely? Does it create curiosity? And does it instill trust in a short package? That is evergreen. That is unchanging, right? The only other difference I would say there is, and again, it's a matter of fads, right? Is that case studies are less meaningful than they've ever been. But I believe that's because originally a relevant case study inside of your email was something that was impressive. Same way. It was like, oh, how did they know? They must have done a lot of research to make sure it was a case study that's very similar to my business, right? But now it's just known. Like the market is caught up. They know that this is the case, but it will move in cycles. Eventually, we'll get to a point where people are like, there's some service that can tell you if something's like human written, and they're like, oh my God, a human actually like sent me this email manually. Or you have to like fill out a freaking form or something to verify that it's a human email. Whatever it is, the market's going to move in cycles. Fads will come and go, but what will remain is always good offer, good message, good frame that creates curiosity and trust.
Okay, so now that obviously things like case studies are not as effective because, as you said, the market is caught up to that. Like, what are people looking for? I know they're looking for trust, as you mentioned, but what is it that can create that trust? How can you bridge that gap now, now that like case studies and things that maybe used to work a couple of years ago or months ago are just not that effective anymore?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty deep question. Do you want me to share my screen at all during this?
If it helps you to explain your point, of course.
Yeah, I think it probably would be a little bit easier to just throw up. Basically, when it comes to creating interest and trust, you have to create a sense of understanding and familiarity. And so, what I'm going to show you and everyone is something pretty baseline at the end of the day, and that's the Hormozi value equation. But I think people go wrong when they look at this value equation and they don't think about it quite deeply enough. So, you have a dream outcome and you have a perceived likelihood of achievement. People view this as, say, crazy grand offer and give validation that I've done it before. And people distill that down to something that looks like this. If I could give you $1 million and I've done it for 3 other people like you in 60 days without you having to whisper sweet nothings into my ear, would that be interesting, right? But what you actually want to look at this as is creating something believable, right? Because anyone could say that, and that's a problem. If anyone can say it, it's not interesting and it's not trustworthy. And then number 2, it's becoming the noise. And then number 3, the fact that it's such a big dream outcome without a meaningful process backing it, a system, means that there's no trust to that offer. And so how do you make it better, right? How do you make giving someone $1 million believable? We'll go through a quick exercise that I do with my team here. Imagine that you're going after a mid-market CFO with a dev team of 10, which is a common company, right? That'll be a segment of 10, 20, 30,000 companies in North America easily, right? And you find that there's a tax loophole as of the most recent tax update, and you build a service of how to get people a massive rebate, maybe $1 million, depending on the size of the company that you target, right? And you say, look, notice that you're working with a team of roughly 10 devs. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? Always, save yourself from making brash assumptions. Be like, it looks like maybe, right? And then you get benefit of the doubt, which is good because you never want to tell someone that you know them better than they know themselves. Really, really bad habit. Also bad for relationships. If anyone's trying to get a girlfriend or a wife, keep that in mind. From there, you go, look, I see you fit this description. You understand them. As a result of this description, there's this thing going on that I've researched, very specific thing. I think as a result of you having this team in this salary range, you could qualify for $1 million outcome. Do you think that would be interesting? Do you want me to show you how it works? Do you want next steps? Yada, yada, yada. Now you're giving $1 million outcome, but you're backed by something very reliable, searchable, understandable, and palatable specifically to your target. If you sent that same message to a casual CEO, they might not trust it. But if you send it to someone with a finance background, right, and you mention specific codes that they would be familiar with from a business point of view, and you mention that it's because of their location and because of their team size, that's really freaking believable. And you haven't done any of the nonsense that people view this equation as. You've raised perceived likelihood of achievement. You've pitched a dream outcome. And it's such a good outcome that this doesn't even freaking matter, right? This is secondary, this bottom side.
It makes a lot of sense as to why that is what would make the perceived likelihood of achievement increase drastically compared to, for example, if you go back to case studies, that's something anyone could say, but if you actually do your research and you include something relevant, industry-specific jargon that the right person would appreciate, once they actually, as you said, the CEO, it might not resonate with the CEO, but if you reach out to that specific person who understands all those specific codes and whatever that you're mentioning, then yeah, it just looks so much more believable that way.
And importantly, that you validated that there's something about their business that makes them very likely to get the outcome. So not just interested in the outcome. So that's interested in the outcome, CFO. The fact that their dev team existing at this size is what creates the incentive opportunity, which, by the way, for anyone out there that wants to look into this, there's a lot of like research incentives. This is a real thing that you guys can take advantage of and get a lot of money back from the government with. And is a very good offer, right? Because we'll do a thing for you and we just take a piece of the outcome, right? This thing that you never thought of. Very cool. If you sent it to a CEO, you would just frame it in a different way, right? It wouldn't be as specific about what the tax code thing is quite as much. And you would present it as a soft opportunity, not like a hard close, in my opinion, right? And so if you want to get like deeper about what I think about case studies, I think that what I just outlined is what a top of funnel offer is. a case study reinforces middle and bottom of funnel offers more so. And to use less jargon, the offer I described is for turning a stranger into someone interested. Okay. As you go down the cycle from interest to sales qualified lead to hopefully closed won, closed lost area, you're going to reinforce with more specific things. So as you go down, you're like, interest, trust me, right? I know things, knowledge arbitrage, right? I know things you don't know. I know things about you that make you qualify for things that you haven't heard about. And then you move down the funnel and you're like, and I've done this before. And they're like, wow, I trust that you can do a thing. And now I've seen you done it before. I'm so happy. And then at the very bottom, what really helps you is unique mechanisms. Because that means that you can't be compared to anyone else in your market. If you have the right unique mechanism, you are now one of one. And so a lot of people, right, especially if they visit your website first, right, maybe they'll say yes to the outbound from that person, or they have a signal and they say yes and they engage. And then with you, you're a stranger to customer flow. You went after a completely cold audience. Everyone said, look, we've done it before. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they did the opposite approach and said that I'm a young gun early in my career, but what you're going to get out of me is someone that's focused on only you. And that's a whole nother value proposition in itself, right? And today, all of them move down funnel and it comes down to the final wire. Do you want this to be based off of price alone? No, you need this.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think most people, if I once again go back to case studies, they use the case studies, I guess, at the wrong point in the funnel, where they're using it to convert that initial interest, whereas that is something that you need to, well, after you generate that initial interest, just to show that you're credible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that most cold email campaigns fail? I know that's a very broad question, but is it because of a lack of all the things you just sort of mentioned over the last?
Not at all. I think it's a lack of testing, honestly. Lack of testing and not putting enough into what the data says is what I would say. So like, I think my greatest advantage is that we go through iteration cycles very quickly and we go through them very programmatically. We have a pathway that we take offers on. And then we've improved that even more with our offer clarity workshop, where we create like competitor battle cards. And so what we want to do is assess what types of offers all the competitors are making across audiences. And we're trying to get better at also getting like what ads they're running and things like this. But it's a bit of a challenge even with ad intel to get like consistently someone's ad data on a business level from like meta ad library. But with all of that, you can distill down and understand, everyone in my market is doing an intro offer, right? Or everyone in my market is doing a free info lead magnet, or everyone in my market has none of that. And you can set your jumping off point in your testing, right? If everyone's already doing an intro offer, you should do an intro offer and make it better, right? You're not going to be able to as easily go from stranger to customer with just what I described, which is I can do this really cool thing, work with me. Instead, it's I can do this really cool thing. Here's a piece of the pie, right? Of the cool thing I do. Or here's a sample, a trial, yada, 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 right? Whatever the intro offer is. The important thing is to make sure, right? The unique advantage in intro offers is who cherry picks the biggest, oh, wow, moment from their clients and their sales process and makes that the intro offer. That's the one that's going to win. Or who cherry picks information arbitrage and makes it something cheap and automated to deliver. That's an advantage, right? But before you build all that, you need to test it all so you don't waste time. So you test up front without building and build after, right? Campaigns fail because of lack of testing and lack of understanding of the current maturity of the market. To distill that answer for you, TLDR.
So before I go into offers, that's something that I also want to talk about a lot. But when it comes to testing, once again, so what exactly do you need to test? Like obviously you need to test different offers, but what else do you need to test? Like how do you go about testing scripts? How do you go about finding winning variants? How do you go about testing different audiences, different ICPs? So how do you go about testing? And I guess, what are the different components that you should be testing?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I would say let's start and pull back like what the components are first. And so the components we think about are the baseline offer, which is the most important component. Next is the call to action, which can actually be the offer, depending on how shortly you present it, right? And then we start testing the frame, okay? And so The frame of the offer is where a lot of the relevancy happens a lot of the time, unless the list is the message. The frame of the offer, to peel back the onion a little bit in the layers, is basically specific pain or alignment with their worldview. And worldview can be peeled back into a few things, which is what are their competitors doing, and what are your competitors doing, and how are they different, or how are they the same, and where do you win and where do you lose, and using that. And then same goes for pain point alignment. It's going to be what's a data point that suggests that they're in this area of the market. That's frame. You don't want to start with that, because segmenting your market out before you know what offer works is really, really hard, because knowing what offer works is going to inform the type of data you want to set around the frame. Because if your offer that works is about saving money, gaining money, time, information arbitrage, so on and so forth, the things that frame it well are going to be different downstream, right? So to start, offer. Offer is the first thing you have to test, and offer is thought of in a lot of different ways, but the way we boil it down is put yourself into the person's shoes that you're targeting and think about what other people in the landscape are doing, and then create a unique mechanism around that thing. So how do we make it the value distilled in a way that is palatable to the person we target without jargon and in as simple a way as possible? So usually you start broad, right? You start broad with a bunch of pain points and features, and then you distill and meld those down into one isolated test of solving big pain in simple way. And that can be solving based on giving them some information to solve it themselves. It can be for a call, and that's where you test call to action friction, right? And those are the main two tests. So we'll start with typically 5 offers. And among those 5 offers, the main thing that we're changing is the length of the presentation. So sometimes we'll hint at 2 valuable things, or the shorter we go, 1 valuable thing and direct line offer. And that isolates our variables so we know where interest lies, okay? If the offer fails, we switch to pain validation, right? So if we've tested a bunch of offers, we now need to see if people will raise their hand if they experience a trouble, right? Because an offer not being compelling enough doesn't tell you enough information about whether or not you're on the right track. So you graduate to, how can I make someone raise their hand that they have a problem, right? So if you're talking to a developer, like, I'm a founder of a business trying to solve a problem, not looking to sell you anything. Are you struggling to go from MVP to production AI agent right now? Question mark. If you can answer and give some feedback of where you're struggling, I would, owe you the world, right? Like, literally, that can be a message. Just market research. Raise their hand. Or you can literally just say, are you experiencing this problem right now? Right? And keep it simple. You have 2 options. Can you use founder clout or not? Right? Basically is what you want to be at, right? I call it, Will Allred calls this the founder card. Great strategy. Anyone who wants to learn more about copy, testing copy as well, by the way, to go deeper, Josh Braun, Will Allred, bastions of knowledge of the highest pedigree, okay? So then people start raising their hands. Now you know, great. Okay, this is the pain that needs to go into the offer, right? Now what's the worldview that's going to make this pain really, really exciting? Or what's the kind of dream outcome we can pitch around the offer? Is it just, we'll solve this problem for you? Or is it, here's a piece of the problem solved for free? Or here's how you can solve the problem yourself, right? It's a pretty simple kind of checklist of things you can try. You try those. They don't work. What do? You see if it'll work on someone that's already raised their hand publicly. Signals, right? You graduate to signals. If signals work only, you're in a bit of trouble, right? Because now you need to rely on people hand raising enough and the value of your offer to be high enough for signals alone to work. Now, there's 100 different ways that you can segment out the audience to test those offers on. That goes a lot deeper. And 100 different ways those segments can set the frame, right? You've got hiring, you've got, are they running ads? Like, what are they actively investing in is a big one for framing the offer. That's their worldview. I believe ads are great. Okay, well, my offer is really complementary to ads. Pretty cool, right? I bet you want to take a gamble more than someone else's offer that isn't, right? So you've differentiated yourself. It goes infinitely deep, to be honest. I'll pause there, and maybe you can you can ask some clarifying questions so I don't go too crazy.
Yeah, so I want to know, like, just so that you know what kind of questions to ask, and I guess also what kind of offer to pitch. I guess then it also depends on the awareness level of your market, right? As in, if
Yes,
people
maturity.
are, yeah, the maturity, so the sophistication of the market, the awareness level of the customer. So how do you go about figuring out at what stage your market is? Because obviously, if you're pitching something to someone who's not even problem aware and you think they're solution aware, there's just, once again, there's going to be this misalignment in what you're pitching and what they already feel and know. So how do you go about figuring that out?
Yeah, 100%. So signals, typically that puts someone in a solution aware area, right? Which is why I think signals are not that great. It becomes a bit of a race to the bottom, and you might not know the messaging that wins you that race, right? Because everyone could hit that signal. It's becoming very commoditized. So specifically for strangers, let's focus on strangers, which is like, cold audience, the most powerful message for your business, being able to turn a stranger into a customer. How do you identify the maturity of the market? There's a few ways. You're going to do deep research first on the competitive landscape to see how they structure their offers and focus only on big organizations. And so the way those people structure their offers, especially depending on the type of like articles you see on their blogs, can tell you a lot. Like the way they position their headlines, for instance, on their blog posts will kind of inform what type of stage of customer they're trying to make aware of their product and how. And same with their landing page, the way they structure their offer. Is it mentioning, developer jargon if their target audience is developers? Or is it just mentioning very crystal clear deployment of agents, right? The difference between uh, a platform like N8N and Zapier, for instance, right? N8N is much more interested in the more mature side of the market. So you actually have to just decide what segment of your market is more mature as well, right? So I want to make it cut and dry. There's going to be different people in your market at different levels of maturity. So let's focus on how to uncover that, because that's where you're going to win and create good segmentation, right? So let's say, for instance, you look at the AEO market, or the generative engine optimization market, okay? How do you find people that are further along in their journey? You have a few options. You could look at their job descriptions, right? In their job descriptions, when they hire a general marketer, what are they looking for in that role? What tech are they using? That will help you define very, very well the level of maturity of that person. And by the way, it is aligned on company like investments, right? What the company believes in, right? So you're making the gamble of you better if you position around that. Important. Or you might have another subsegment that is actively hiring directly someone for the job you do, which is even more like they're way more mature. They're like, I need a role just for this. And so you're going to have to be very careful with the way you present your offer. You really need to fill a gap in the way they view the market. Like you have to get so much more sophisticated. You have to be like, Asana, I know that you do SEO to the highest degree. I would never assume I'm going to beat your 20-person team that's focused on SEO. But there's this new thing going on Reddit, I noticed, where you guys are getting a lot of negative Reddit posts about you, right? And they're ranking in the top 5 of Google search. You can't really protect that just with blog posts. Do you have a Reddit strategy to make sure you just knock them out of SERP, right? That's cool. And that's very complimentary to all of our 20 freaking employees worth of SEO investment, maybe spending an extra 30K a month of the freaking 500K, a million a month we're spending on SEO is worth it to make our SEO more effective, right? So now we're kind of connecting the dots of how understanding the segment, the maturity, helps you inform the offer and align it with their worldview. So what do you do with like what's a totally cold audience? You would view that one basically as everyone else. They're not following a competitor. They're not triggering a signal. They're not visiting your website. You would view them as mostly cold, but you would also look at like, well, how long has this thing been around, right? Like, is this ChatGPT ads new, or is it, 2008 SEO new, right? And then you would try to look at, well, okay, so maybe they know about SEO, but how can I differentiate from every other SEO offer? Let's cherry pick the biggest SEO change that happened, right? Oh, these guys are like, posting blogs sometimes, but did they know that if they just insert this text snippet into their blogs on their website, that AI will automatically now be able to index it, and now they have AIO, right? So does that make sense? Where you're trying to surface basically just off of what they're doing, what their maturity is, and then everything else you make assumptions based off of where the market is at and headed in general, and if it's growing, right?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And do you think that basing your outreach on certain situations and such context is not only the future but the present of cold email? Do you think that that is a better approach to basing your outreach on any sort of other, I guess, basic filtering mechanisms that people use? Do you think that basing it on context and situations like that is the best way to go about it?
Yeah, I do, because, and the reason I call it situations is it's actually like a lot of things distilled into one idea. But basically, it's like if you were to take surfaceable data points that are recent, you might call them a signal, and you were to take surfaceable data points that can be legacy, can be really old, or can be even outside of the company, like a regulation, right? You can segment or create situations that your market falls into, right? So some people might view a market as like, I don't know, anyone, you could even say a market is anyone posting blogs. Well, maybe there's a segment that posts 10 blogs a month, or maybe there's a segment that uses this technology. That's all fine and dandy, but a segment's just a segment. What a situation is the meaning behind that, right? Because what actually matters is what your taste, right, as a founder that understands your product, sees as the meaning behind that action being taken by a company, right? And that's where you get into actually creating a moat. And that's why I call like a stealth offer, is when you can bridge that gap between what is said, what is seen, and what is understood, and apply that to programmatic testing to let the market tell you if it's winning or not. And the beauty of situations is they can transcend a vertical, right? They can transcend even an ICP, right? Like if you land on the right situation, you can just go across the whole market with something meaningful and highly contextually relevant to what they care about. And this leans into actually something that I define that Alex Hormozi does with all of his offers, which is a bet on you offer. So a bet on you offer, it kind of explains itself, but basically it's doing a balancing act between what you're bringing to the table and what they're bringing to the table. Because the number one thing that you can do is get someone to believe that they're right for your offer. And so Alex Hormozi does a wonderful job of this. If you want to be a part of acquisition.com, you've got to be doing minimum 3 million a year, right? Bet on you. You're betting on yourself as well, because he's going to invest in your business, but you're giving up a piece of the pie, right? So he's going to give you all the tools and resources, but at the end of the day, you're at a loss if you're not the founder that can take that and take your business further with it, right? If you're part of Gym Launch, it's a bet on you offer. It's, hey man, look, you've got a gym in this position. We're going to give you the exact toolkit that's worked for other gyms. Do you think you can make it happen? Do you think you can be one of our success stories? Go back down to the initial Gym Launch offer that he gives actual recipients of it, which is, what do the members get? Look, if you manage to go through this entire process and drop 10 pounds and commit to it and meet all these benchmarks, it's free, and you get a discount on your membership at the end, right? You get all this training for free if you just show up and bet on yourself, right? Bet on you offer. And then the beauty of that is that they see the transformation and then they're like, I want to buy, right? They can feel the transformation. So that's why situations matter, because they tell you how to make offers that are contextually relevant to the business, but also apply your taste to it, which is the final frontier. If you just outsource to AI, you get what AI thinks. If you just do what every template tells you, you send a message that is noise. If you just use signals kind of enforce a message that is noise a lot of the time, right? Situations is where you get to apply your unique perspective to the data the market is giving you.
What makes a good situation? As you said, there's hundreds of different types of situations. And
Yeah.
so what are you looking for from a situation? I know that that could come down to your specific taste, but even if that's the answer to this question, then what
Yeah.
do you
So the
look
main things
for?
I look for to define situations are what they're investing in, what they're not, because sometimes that can be like anti-signals are just as valuable depending on what's out there. And then there's complementary ones. So for instance, right, you can build an entire offer around the situation of someone being a solo founder with one salesperson on the team, right? What's the situation, right? What's the pain point? Bridging the gap between founder-led sales and that handoff point, right? That's very powerful, right? You could define a situation as a first-time founder, right? Not a second-time founder, a first-time founder making their first sales hire or 2 sales hires. And then you might be pitching them building out their sales team. Like, condense that build out from 12 months to 3 months. That transcends markets, that transcends personas, right? You might have another situation, and I think it's best to just go through examples where you see that a founder or a team ended up getting rid of their only marketing person, right, recently, right? So you might look up all the marketing people in a market that just got hired and then check their past experience and see ones that left a business 3 months ago, and then you look at the business and see there's no other marketers on the team. That's a whole situation in itself. And so what I would encourage is to find the data points that are going to be common, that are complementary to your offer. And so a lot of this process is actually just looking at your sales call transcripts and doing as deep of research as possible on your current clientele and trying to build out that knowledge base. And that's where it becomes less intuitive and a lot easier, where AI can actually brainstorm with you and find patterns, right? Like really good Claude Code use case, find patterns in your current customers, your engaged leads, what the conversations looked like, what the sales call transcripts say, and then also the gap between what is said and understood by the founder or the salesperson on the call, because broken telephone's a real thing. You really want to see, and also historical context is a thing, right? So your understanding of your market really helps take what could be little things to an AI looking at the transcript and make sure that they're flagged as big things because you just know it,
Super valuable. I want to sort of step away from the situation-based targeting and move into the messaging component now. So you mentioned, I heard like 100 times in your videos, you mentioned diagnostic messaging.
Yes.
So what is diagnostic messaging?
Hand in hand with situations. Yeah, hand in hand, right? Hand in hand. So we'll do one more example to explain this. So someone uses Zoom Info and you are a lead generation firm and you say, look, imagine you're using Zoom Info. When's the last time your reps actually went in there to pull a contact versus just researching them on LinkedIn? ? What we do is we deliver all the information for the same price directly into a Slack channel every time an engaged lead shows up. Interested in speaking? And they're spending fucking 30 grand a year on Zoom Info for something that their reps aren't picking up, right? And so that's diagnostic messaging. Because Zoom Info is not a great product and is very expensive, that you can actually position an entire service around it and give them something way better for the same price that is way less friction to experience. And so you might check if they have Slack and Zoom Info, right? That's diagnostic messaging, right? The second way that messaging becomes diagnostic is by doing it programmatically. So you don't want to fall in love with any message, just test everything. The greatest advantage right now in cold email is to test everything and test faster. And so the beauty of diagnostic messaging is that tests become very clear. So if you do that situation and you diagnose that issue in your message and you deliver the offer, it's like the data is now transparent. You know what I mean? There's no fluff in your data. You just know that, okay, Zoom Info is not a meaningful way to target these companies. And not only that, I know that the replacement of their current tech stack for a service is not compelling. You've learned 2 really valuable things that eliminate a whole subset of testing that you can do with your offer, right?
Yeah. So what validates a test? So I remember you told me, I can't remember the number, but you told me that you guys do so many different tests as well. Yeah. So what validates a test? What is the metric that you look at?
Yeah. So initially we just look at interest and then we start looking at full picture funnel, because the problem with looking at full funnel is that it takes like months for your funnel to catch up, right? So you want to drive interest because interest is going to get the most conversations over the line, and those conversations can give you better direction in the future, more concrete direction. But to start, we're just looking at baseline, how many engaged, and very important, not positive reply percent, engaged leads per amount of people contacted. So contacts per engaged lead, said it backwards. And that's important because you could have a campaign that's ripping in reply rate because for some reason the copy just like is beautiful to Google or Outlook, right? Or man, there's so many spin text variations, it's the best. But maybe that does something to the way the offer is presented that just doesn't quite click. And the offer that's, a 3% reply rate instead of 8 is getting like a 40% positive reply rate, right? Whereas that one that's getting an 8% reply rate is getting like 12% positive reply rate. Like they could actually be in parity engaged leads per contact wise, right? And so you don't just want to go off positive reply rate because either of those messages could actually win in terms of number of leads as the outcome, right? Even though the positive reply rate's totally different. The 40% could win depending on the makeup of contacts per engaged lead, or the first one could win, right? So that's step one. And then what's the benchmark? Benchmark is totally industry dependent, totally LTV dependent. But as a baseline, we really need a minimum of one engaged lead per 500 contacts to say this is something worth pursuing. So not something that is done, something that we can start to test against and build upon.
Okay. Yeah. And then once you find that winning variant or whatever it is, how do you go about doubling down on that? How do you go about creating new tests based on the winning variants that you find? So for example, you find a winning offer, a winning script variant. What would be the following process after that?
Yeah, so this is where you can start to apply AI a little bit in order to create those frames, right? So say we find out that people are really, really excited about the idea of Reddit SEO enhancing their current efforts, right? And then we go, well, what if we mention their exact efforts that they're doing right now, right? And now we're testing frame. So like, well, let's see what frame wins. Is it people doing founder-led content and on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn content ranks, but Reddit ranks even better. So what if we took that content, we just put it on Reddit? That's a bet on you offer, by the way. You're already doing something great, and we're going to just repurpose it into something else great. Do you think your stuff's good enough? Right? Bet on yourself, right? And then you might have a whole nother bucket that's like, look, what about people posting 5+ blogs a week? What about people doing X, Y, Z? You test all those frames next. And then maybe you say, well, what if we offered something for free on top of this offer? So what if we said that PS working on an audit for you, right? Like what if we baked in this winning offer with something else that's free? And then what if we tested just the free thing against this offer and saw what the difference is, right? So you can still test intro offers against your winner, but the important thing is to make sure your winner is always being tested against with small changes, either the call to action or the frame. Those are only two things I will test on a winning offer. Until we go like crazy deep, and then we're like, can we make this offer 100% AI and start mix and matching every little thing about their careers page, recent news, yada, yada, yada. Usually not the case, but sometimes we'll go that deep. The most important thing is like, is there a frame that wins harder than other frames? Can we max out that frame only? And then is there a call to action structure that is better? Like, is direct to call way better than offering a resource on the thing or offering an explanation or just information, right? Or even potentially even just like offering to show them how you've done it before for a similar business. Like, don't even talk about a case study, just be like a walkthrough, right? It's less about like the outcome and more about the process, which the process is always more believable than the outcome, right? And then finally, how can we test it against something that's just upfront free and which wins long-term, right?
Yeah, so do you think there's a CTA that at least right now in cold email is universally better? So for example, giving away something for free, like a free lead magnet, or pitching a call directly, offering to send over some sort of a Loom video, or you guys see better
Loom video is easily the best way to get positive replies day one. Easily. I think Loom video is the best. And the reason for that is because you can really get an understanding of resonance with like directly from what you said about the company, and you can iterate in every video as you go. But I would only recommend doing that if you're a founder-led sales process.
Okay, and then is there
you're not going to get enough information back if your sales team's doing it. You just won't. You won't get that like contextual understanding of your market. Whereas, and which is why I feel like email is a better channel as well than cold calling. Because if you're not the founder cold calling, you're not getting the right data back. It's just going to your salesperson, and now you have like an intuitive sales process and an intuitive understanding of your message, not a real understanding of your message. And what if that salesperson is just a giga chat at handling objections, right? Like he just will not let someone leave the conversation. He's maximally persuasive. Did you find a good offer, or did you find a talented person, right? So that's why I think cold email is the ultimate distillation. There's no image, there's no video, there's no extra fluff. It's literally just plain text in your inbox. Do you like this thing? And then it carries over to everything else beautifully because of that.
Yeah, I remember, I think this is something that you told me last time we spoke as well, because it's like the only way that you can just validate that offer based on 50 words, like 20 words that the actual offer is, as opposed to having a visual in there and a bunch of other components that could affect the end outcome.
Snoop Dogg uses my, like you throw Snoop Dogg in and all of a sudden someone's like, oh, I'll check out the website now. That's hilarious.
Yeah. So just to recap and close off this part, which is like the testing aspect of things, you want to test the offer. Once you find that winning offer, you can then start testing around specific components of how you're going to frame it, how you're going to ask for the prospect to take some sort
how
of
you're going to frame
action.
it to them, how you're going to frame it to them specifically. Yeah. So like your baseline offer should already be like relevant to a marketer segment, but how do you make it relevant to that situation, right? That subsegment of situation. So yeah, like I have a big situation of like growing companies, and that says that they're investing in things, and you just relate it back to common initiatives. Well, what if I relate it to their exact initiative? How much better does that make it? How does that make it so I can change the contents of the copy? Or how do I relate it back to the specific people or technology they're using? How does that change the offer? How does that make it more compelling? Because the tech stack they're using is like one of the most powerful ways to frame your offer. Like if someone's using Jira, right? And you're using ClickUp, and you're like, what if you just have Jira plus your documents, plus your meetings, plus everything in one place instead of 4 different tools that half of them your team forgets to use, ? Right? It's a totally different thing than saying ClickUp lets you manage your projects.
Yeah. So if we look at post positive response, like things that you do after you get that positive response, I know you mentioned in one of the videos that I saw that you guys implement a lot of warm calling. So in terms of what you do after you get the positive response, what is the sequence? Do you have some sort of a sequence in place? Even if you actually like book someone in on a call, like do you have a pre-call sequence? How do you maximize the chances of converting that positive response into someone who is going to show up to the sales call and also show up with the right mindset as well?
Yeah, well, I think when you speak to something really relevant to them with your offer, you do a lot of the heavy lifting there. And a good example of this is that exact Reddit offer I've been talking about here is a real thing we tested. And when we gave something for free, we didn't have a buyer showing up. We had an interested, like curious person showing up, like a marketing qualified lead. But when we relate it back to their exact company initiatives and how it enhances them without anything for free, by the way, like the close rate was like 50% instead of 10. Like unbelievable close rate, unbelievable show up rate. Like everyone was like, wow, this is going to be the best thing, right? So a lot of it comes down to the email you send, actually, which is why it's important to look at full funnel over time, right? Not just interested replies, like I kind of said when you're asking about how I test messaging. But then number 2, there's a lot of things you can do from the point someone receives a message to have the highest chance of success of not only them booking a call, but showing up, okay? I would recommend everyone actually check out Troy Aitken on this exact concept of warm calling. He trained my team and myself on warm calling because I became so out of touch with it over time that I just needed his help, and he's a killer. So he went through a full process with me, one of the most valuable consults ever. We like doubled our booking rates overnight as a result of just better warm calling practices, okay? And then he also put me under the under the microscope in front of my team, getting me to do the things like and show that I could do it well, which is great. Really great teaching moment. And so first thing you want to do is reply comes through, make sure it's categorized well. Try to have an AI hopefully plugged into your FAQs, like just trained on your website that if it's like a question that comes through, it can just like pre-draft an answer for you. That would be huge. And the reason you want something like that, and the reason why we built that, is that it makes it very quick to go from like baseline knowledge to condensed good message. And sometimes it's already a condensed good message, to be honest. But that's the easiest part, getting the right context into the message, right? If it's a question. and then being able to reply in 15 minutes or less. And the faster, the better. Like there's great data on this. And then the moment you reply, calling them, because now you have an excuse to call them, right? So you replied, hey, saw your email, just finishing off a response, had a question, right? Opens up the conversation pretty easily. And then be ignorant, ultimately ignorant, unless you're the founder calling. If there's an objection, it's like, dude, I just started here. Like, I honestly, like, I know my founder would have the answer to this. And it does look like he has some availability tomorrow. So instead of getting you with like one of our sales reps, I get you directly scheduled with him. Does that sound okay to answer your question? Right. And so you're like also creating frame, which is beautiful, right? Because you might send as the founder inbox, but when an assistant calls you, you create frame in that conversation that your time is very important, which is great. And then what do you do when you follow up? You want to just like, if they say yes to a call, literally just hammer them to no end with like times to get started and like a little bit of context or a cool question or something. If they've only expressed interest and they don't want to go for a call, your job is to ask for permission for a call in your emails. Permission. And share valuable things. And that doesn't mean case studies. Like case study hammering, I don't think is the best. It's the process of the case study. Okay. And so you follow up, we follow up 7 times, we call 3 times. And whenever we call and they don't pick up, we drop an SMS is the baseline system. And then we'll even opt them into like a newsletter out the other end. If they're like fully, they never showed up to a call, here's the newsletter. And so we'll work with clients to build out a newsletter if they don't have one, based off of like everything we've learned from our market and from the campaigns. And that's probably like one of the best ways to have like a full funnel approach. And then eventually re-engagement campaigns, right? Your old warm leads are the best possible leads you can re-engage. Think about re-engaging them downstream with those intro offers. They can be a first test. If they were initially interested, one of your follow-ups can be, by the way, what I could do is before this call, I could build a list of these 3 influencers, engagers. So you just have it handy. And I can walk you through the playbooks we've used to do outreach towards signals like this. Does that sound good? It's like, oh, actually, yeah, this call does sound good now, you know?
So
Yeah.
maybe how often would you re-engage? What's like a good time frame for that?
Yeah, I mean, like, if we're talking hard re-engagement, you can get like really nuanced with this, and you could say like, oh, I'm going to develop a freaking wacko flacco scoring system that syncs up with my CRM because they visited my website and now they get 25 points, and they engaged with me on social media and now they get X number of points. And by the way, through that whole process, really good idea to connect on LinkedIn and potentially message them. At the very least, connect and opt them into an engagement workflow. You don't even have to message them. Like just make your face show up nonstop on their feed, like comment over and over and over again. But in terms of re-engagement, like outside of the complicated way to do it, I would just say like keep it simple, keep it clean, like re-engage every 60 to 90 days, unless they give you like a hard no, and then make it like 6 months to a year.
Are you guys also incorporating LinkedIn into the entire, I guess, omni-channel approach now? Because cold email maybe once upon a time was just cold email, but now you're like adding warm calling, you're adding LinkedIn, trying to create everything into an omni-channel
Newsletter,
working
eventually
into thing.
content. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
what are
LinkedIn's
like
really
the core
important.
pillars then of this omni-channel approach? What is the secret?
Yeah. So everything's important, but the core pillar that everything revolves around for me is cold email, because it shows you how to turn a stranger into a customer, which is the most important thing, right? And then the other pillars that come alongside it is big time LinkedIn and content, like YouTube, LinkedIn content, because every time someone gets a cold email they're interested in, like 50 to 80% of people that are interested a little bit, like curious, right? They're going to be like Mitchell Keller, LeadGrow, LeadGrow.ai, right? Like look you up. And if you just have a terrible social presence, they're going to be like, this guy's a scammer. Screw this guy. Whereas if they see, like, if someone looks up freaking Nick Sarev after receiving an email from him, they see he has 350,000 subscribers, and the number 1 video on YouTube is him doing a podcast interview on a stage with Alex Hormozi. What's going to happen to his campaign? Everything's going to be better, right? So you start with email because it's risk-free. It's basically anonymous. Like no one remembers you because there's no inbox that stays around forever connected to you, like with LinkedIn, right? That message history is there forever. And then also your face is there, so it's more memorable. Like now they have face to name, and like there's more associations. It's just basic neurons firing at this point. It's just how your brain works. With cold email, that's almost never going to happen. People are going to forget the next day. You can re-engage the market more regularly without the context of your last engagement, right? On LinkedIn, you send a new message, 60 days later, they see your old message in that same message, and they're like, this is a totally different offer. Is this even the same? Like, these guys must not know what they're doing. They keep changing their offer, right? So LinkedIn is secondary. It happens after the fact. We take the learnings from cold email, we apply it to LinkedIn, so LinkedIn has way less reputation risk. LinkedIn is more of a long-term platform. It's about nurture. It's about adding content into the game. Cold email can be like really direct to conversion, right? It's, again, very isolated to the offer. No one's really checking your LinkedIn profile as in detail. Someone gets a LinkedIn message, they check your profile, they look through it. If it's bad, your chances are lower. They're not going to go to your website as often, right? So cold email, then LinkedIn, then content and newsletter is the way we view things.
So would you start an automated warm sequence in LinkedIn? So for example, you get the interested lead, like connect with them on LinkedIn and then sort of continue from there?
Never automated. And the reason for that is because what if they reply, like there's that big problem of like they reply from a call, they reply from an email, right? Like how do you sync that up effectively? Dude, I think anyone that's like automating LinkedIn like messages is kind of crazy. Like they must have like a really big, good problem and that they just have infinite leads. But for the vast majority of people, like, dude, just fucking send a message to your 100 engaged leads that are still in cycle each month, you know? Like you can have templates, you can have AI do a lot of the work. You can have AI pre-draft the message, but be the person that manually sends the message so that you don't have to coordinate across, you know, when a workflow breaks and you send a like a breakup LinkedIn DM to someone who already booked a call and now your call cancels, like just get rid of some of the tail end risk, I think, man.
Okay, cool. So one more thing I want to talk about is just Claude Code. We talked a bit about this before as well. So for maybe people who are watching, maybe are not as familiar with Claude Code, how are you actually using it inside of your process? And what exactly is Claude Code, I guess?
Yeah. What is Claude Code is a really good question, actually. We'll start there. So obviously it's taking the world by storm, but like beyond what it is, it's an AI coder that sits inside of your terminal or IDE. And what the hell is an IDE? Let's get to like the actual baseline of what Claude Code is for knowledge work. What Claude Code lets you do is it gives it something called a harness. So what is an AI harness? It's the thing like how do you ride a horse? You need a harness, right? It's the thing that's like really controlling how it interacts with its world, okay? And so if you give an AI really good tools and really good understanding of how to use them, it can do anything, freaking anything. So that's the beauty of Claude Code, and that's where it's different from a browser version, okay? The second place that it's different is that Claude Code understands out of the box how to spawn more little Claude Codes. So if every Claude Code is one brain, one context window, it can say, great, this is too much work for my brain. And so instead of that annoying flag where it says out of context, get a new window or compacting, it just spawns a new guy, spawns another guy to do this and reports back. So you're getting more work that's better work from one prompt, okay? And now the final thing is that Claude Code has access to your entire file base. So if you were to, or whatever you give it access to be fair. So if you were to make a point of comparison of this, if you have GPTs, right? So custom GPTs, or if you have skills or gems or projects, each platform calls it something different because each platform needs their own unique branding, but that's besides the point. They all do the same thing. You give them some sort of data that they're trained on and some sort of instruction to do a thing. And so the beauty of Claude Code is that in plain language, when you talk to it, it knows what to surface at any given time and can string them together. So projects are normally isolated, but in Claude Code, you could have each of your projects readily available and stringable together. So you could have a project that's for research, a project that's for copy, a project that's for list sourcing, a project that's for list building, a project that is for generating your inbox management reply templates, and so on. And you can make them all strung together in one go. And Claude Code would just be able to build that and solidify it into a skill, a workflow, or a command because it can code things. So that's the value of Claude Code. All your knowledge in one place, all contextual, and you can now give the AI any tool you want to build anything or string things together in whatever flow you like.
I guess if you could give people watching like a couple of use cases, what are the best
Yes.
use cases that you're using it for that I guess you wouldn't have been able to otherwise do before Claude Code? How has it actually improved your cold email process?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people can resonate with this. Like you'll have like a CSV and you'll be like, I need to do analysis on this, and then you upload it to like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, and it's like, this is too big, man. I can't I can't handle this, right? So data analysis is the big one, man. Like data guys are going to be out of jobs, I think, because of how good Claude Code is. Like you can just surface patterns that you didn't even think were possible with Claude Code. And then integration of data streams. So not only can you check what's in the CSV, you can expand, right? So that's another huge use case. When a customer sends me a list of all of their closed won, instead of like a very stagnant clay workflow where all the data is very independent of one another, I can throw that into a Supabase or keep it on my PC as a CSV, and I can dissect and compare against each other. So I can find patterns between leads, and I can scrape their websites, and I can turn them into cards, right, of personas, and I can do it again all in one place, and then isolate it into a client profile so that when I go to call a skill to write their copy, all right there, ready to go, no copy pasting, no copy pasting, right? And then when you get through a workflow that's really, really good, right? So this actually is a use case. It doesn't sound like it, but a use case of Claude Code is that when you get through a workflow that's really, really good, you can solidify it as a skill, right? You can reflect upon it and you can turn it into something repeatable and callable, which is actually like the biggest use case because that's universal use case to anyone's systems or flows. And then the final thing that I think is like a really powerful use case is just data management. So not data analysis, data management. You might have like, I don't know, 200 clay tables, hundreds of CSVs, right? And you don't know what websites are in service, out of service, companies dead, companies alive. You can take all that data very quickly and have Claude Code turned into a Supabase. And now you have forever data that's valuable to you, that you can pull against, that you can pull from and save a bunch of money on, right? By not having to constantly go back and forth. And also, you can isolate that into your own client's TAMs, right? Like single TAMs inside Supabase, so you can pull against it. Whereas clay tables have limits, CSVs have limits. This wouldn't have a limit. You would always be able to know, have I contacted this business before? Have I not? Have I already enriched this business? Have I not? Did this person leave this business? Did they not? Right? And keep up-to-date information. So number one use case for me across the board, there's a pattern here, data. Like being able to manipulate data. I think a lot of the things people are doing around automating their processes, if it's not a knowledge-based process, then just use N8N and get it to build it for you. It's really good at building N8N workflows, deterministic workflows. And then the final thing is add a fun chime to your Claude Code so that when it finishes work, it like gives you a jingle. So like mine does a Pokemon level up noise and it goes like, and so I know when work is done, and then I can just dive back in and know exactly where it needs me to intervene. Okay.
Yeah, so one last question on Claude Code. Do you think that this is an absolute must in 2026 for the cold email process? Do you think that this is something people should actually make an effort to learn?
I think people should be making an effort to learn it outside of cold email. It just, I think general rule of thumb, like you need to become AI native in order to, yeah, be successful. Like I've kind of rolled out Claude Code to a few of my clients and the sentiment is always the same. It's like, I now understand what like people talk about when they say like 10x marketer, 10x engineer, 100, like these like kind of buzzwords. He's like generating comparative analysis between his influencer campaigns based off of scraping the influencer post data after it goes live from a week and then comparing it to how much he paid for the post to get a comprehensive analysis of cost per output, like CPM, right? And before he's like, to do this, it would take me a whole day. And now it's a skill that Claude Code just runs for me, like on its own accord, right? Like it's one slash command and it's done in an hour. And I just go back and look at it, right?
Yeah.
So think outside cold email for sure. But yeah, like Claude Code is going to speed you up. Do you need it? Absolutely not. You could continue using Claude projects and staying palatable. but it makes knowledge work way faster because it removes copy paste and allows you to piece together knowledge, whereas you just can't do that in isolated environments.
So one last question before we wrap this up. I always like to end these with one clear takeaway that people should, like if someone were to take away one thing from our entire conversation, and I know there's like 200 things that people could take away from this, but if you could sum it up into one thing that people could take away to see better results with cold email in 2026, like what should that be?
I'm going to give two things because they're complementary, but they're very short. Test more and believe in your unique taste way more. So what does that mean? Everything in your background that informs who you are is applicable to your campaigns. Use it. It's going to be so, so valuable. My favorite one in the world is from Miyamoto Musashi, and it's from one thing, no 10,000 things. And Hormozi distills this into something more digestible. Everyone has a bridge to cross. Your campaigns are just bridges. And how many logs you have in that bridge to hop on is all of your past skills and experiences, which means all skills carry over to other skills, but also they make the next venture, the next problem easier to cross. Don't listen to gurus. Test based off your own skills and understanding, and you'll be way more successful. Test more. Use your own taste.
Mitchell, this was super valuable. Thank you for taking the time to share everything. I know people are leaving here with a much clearer view as to how to approach their cold email campaigns, and hopefully they have like at least 1% of the way that you think about all these things just after watching this episode. So for anyone who wants to learn more about LeadGrow, where's the best place that they can find you?
Yeah, check out my YouTube, Mitchell Keller plus LeadGrow maybe. You might run into some MLB professional that has my name that's currently dominating me in search. But yeah, if you just throw cold email next to my name, it'll probably show up, and you'll be able to learn cold email there for free.
Perfect. And we're going to link everything in the description below, so you'll be able to find that as well. And for everyone watching, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you, Mitchell.
No worries. Thank you.